Can you hear my heater running?
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the WinMBNA webinar today. Before we get started, if you all would help us out and put yourself on mute when you're not speaking to help limit the background noise. Feel free to type your comments in the chat as we go through the presentation. Allison will stop a few times and take questions, and we'll also field questions at the end. So please feel free to do that. Now I will turn it over to our WinMBNA president, Abby Metcalf, to introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Today's webinar will empower your business decisions with data-driven insights. Our speaker, Alison Raymer, will share fundamental concepts for calculating your business market share to improve your strategic planning and decision-making. Alison is the co-owner and CEO of Emerson Monument Company in Springdale, Arkansas. In addition to her passion for working with families to create beautiful and unique memorials in honor of themselves or their loved ones, Alison has more than 17 years of experience running a monument company and an MBNA in business and a background in accounting. She also published her first book this year, so I encourage you to check that out. I'm excited for Alison to share her experience with us today. Thank you so much, Alison, and welcome.
Thanks, Abby. Thank you all so much for having me and for taking time out of a busy Tuesday to join in and learn about market share. A little about my background. I thought I wanted to be an auditor, okay? So I love processes, I love checks and balances, I love data. So of course I was interested in studying accounting. So I earned my degree in professional accountancy from Ouachita Baptist University, and later, as Abby mentioned, got my MBNA from John Brown University. I started my career working for one of the big four accounting firms, and in a turn of events, bought a monument company. So here I am. I love working in the monument industry, and I love bringing my accounting in with it. So I'm really excited to share with you all today. Way back in 2013, I sat through a webinar that was presented by Don Calhoun. It was called, Are You an Ostrich or an Eagle? And if you know Don, or if you've worked with Don, then you know that he's an incredible market visionary. He has an uncanny ability to really take his background in statistics and combine it with his creativity to envision where he could be versus where he is. And that presentation was probably one of the best I had ever heard Don do. The whole focus of the presentation was to encourage monument builders to embrace the trend of cremation rather than sticking their heads in the ground like an ostrich. He was encouraging everyone to soar like an eagle, hence the name of his presentation. And for me, that presentation kind of changed everything, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to share my screen here. Don gave me permission to use his slide from that presentation, so I'm really excited. Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay. So his presentation right here was really important to me. He was talking about, our total, the cremation rates, what they were projected to do over the next several years, and how monument companies should react to that. And he had this little calculation, you see, where he said to calculate your total at-need market, take your trade area population and multiply it by the death rate. And I remember sitting there looking at that thinking, that kind of answers a lot of questions for me, because I had been curious how to calculate my total market and my market share. But I knew that the calculation wasn't quite that simple. Of course, he was keeping it simple for purposes of his presentation, but in reality, the calculation's a little bit more than that. So I sat there and I listened, and later asked him if I could have the slides from that presentation, because I really wanted to dive in and learn more about calculating market share. So that's where we are today. I've spent quite a long time perfecting this, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So our goals today, I want to show you not only how to calculate your estimated market share, but I also want to help you better understand what the market share is and how to use it. That's like the most important thing, is knowing how to use this market share calculation. Because you can calculate it all day long, but if you don't know what to do with it, if you don't know how to use it to your advantage, then I don't want that. I want to provide you something that's really going to change the course of your business going forward. Okay, so why should you pay close attention today? As the cremation rate increases, our industry will naturally see a decline in demand for cemetery memorial products. I know that there's folks who don't agree with me on that, but it's just kind of the natural part of it, okay? So as the cremation rate increases and we see that decline in demand, competition's gonna really ratchet up, okay? It's going to become more intense. So if you look at my slide here, the National Funeral Directors Association expects the national cremation rate to be about 80% by 2045. And according to CANA, which is the Canadian and North American Cremation Association, I think is what it's called, the 2023 cremation rate in the US averaged at about 60%, and it's estimated to grow at 1.55% per year. So navigating this competition requires that we're able to identify our target market and then track our market share. Both are really important. We want to be able to identify our target market so that we're not spending marketing dollars needlessly, so that we understand our target market's needs, what they want. And then we want to be able to track that market share. And we're going to go over all of that today. So what is market share? We're going to keep it simple today, okay? There's lots of different markets, but today we're going to keep it simple. So everyone, whether they are knocking sales out of the park or barely getting by, has a market that they serve, okay? And today we're going to focus on geographic market. It's just a nice, easy way to begin. We can kind of dip our toes in, and then as you grow more comfortable, you can explore calculating market share with other market segmentations later on your own. So everybody has an area that they generally serve. This is the area that they most commonly sell monuments that they're going to install in, okay? If you sell monuments online, you're in a little bit of a different boat, but you can still utilize this information, okay? But for the majority of the folks, you know, you're selling monuments and you're installing it in a given area. That would be your geographical market, okay? So, the fact is, not everyone in your geographical market is a potential customer. They haven't encountered a death, they're not thinking about death. And not all potential customers in your market are going to buy from you. We all know that. The clients that do buy from you, they're your market share, okay? That's the portion of the market that you own. So we're going to talk about increases in market share. And we're going to start by talking about cherry pies, okay? So my mom makes the most incredible cherry pie known to mankind. You might think your mom makes the best. My mom does, okay? So let's say that she made us all cherry pie today, okay? And I take a slice and you take a slice, and we'll use Don Calhoun because he's usually a great sport. Let's say he takes a slice. And we've all taken a slice of this cherry pie and we're all chowing down, eating, having a good time, okay? We're all eating. That's the key there. But the market share pie, unlike the cherry pie, has nothing to do with whether or not we all get to eat. It has everything to do with who took in the most calories, how are they storing those calories, and how are they burning those calories. Theoretical, of course. Are those businesses getting skinny or are they getting fat? And with market share, getting skinny isn't necessarily a good thing. But getting fat or seeing increases in your market share doesn't necessarily equate to recognizing higher revenues or higher net profits. So you have to really be careful in how you analyze it. I mean, increases in market share sound like a great thing. It means you're gaining ground relative to your competitors, right? But why are you gaining market share? Are you just out there winning and putting the right message in front of the right people? If so, you want to sustain that. Are you priced too cheaply so people are coming to you? Is it your incredibly innovative designs and products? If so, you'll want to sustain that. Are you operating more efficiently than others? Knowing why you are winning helps ensure that you can plan to sustain your market share and not lose any of it in the future. Will you always win? Not likely. But knowing what is helping you win is invaluable. And losing market share sounds horrific. It means you're losing the share of your pie in relation to your competitors. However, it does not necessarily mean your sales are lower or that your net income is lower than that of your competitors. We're going to learn a little bit more about that later. But anytime we see a shift in market share data, we want to know why. Like I mentioned earlier, why is the market share decreasing? Is it that the right message isn't reaching your target market? Are you priced too high? Do you offer the right product mix to meet the needs and demands of your clientele? Are you operating too slowly? Is your turnaround time too slow? Are there new competitors that have entered your market? Is online competition moving in? One great way to track that is by tracking any decreases in your market share. So the bottom line, whether you're seeing decreases or you're seeing increases, we want to know why. And the next question, aside from why, we want to know if we're profitable. Okay, just because you took more of the pie, just because you took a bigger share, just because you consumed more calories, okay, does came out ahead. And that sounds counterintuitive. I get that. But analyzing market share is crucial to do in conjunction with analyzing in conjunction with your sales and your profitability. So we're going to touch on this kind of at the end of the webinar. We're going to calculate this market share data, and then we're going to look at some financial data to see how you use that market share in your analysis. And I'm going to break it down and make it really easy for you. But I wanted you to keep this in mind as we begin calculating our estimated target market right now. So before we jump into market share, I wanted to see if anyone has any questions before we kind of dive into these calculations.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but feel free to unmute and ask your question out loud. No questions so far?
Perfect. Okay, so we are going to get started. All right. Now that you've seen kind of a broad picture of how market share works and you understand why it's important, we're going to dive in and calculate it, okay? And we're going to start by just gathering our data, okay? Kind of like cooking. You want to gather all your ingredients. Before you make that cherry pie, you got to have the ingredients, right? Same thing with market share. We're going to get started by making sure that we're able to clearly define our geographic market. Most of the monument companies that I talk to, monument owners and managers, they can usually tell me like, hey, we operate within a 200-mile radius of our shop or whatever the case may be. That makes it really easy. But if that radius includes a state line, if it includes different county lines, that can make it difficult for calculating your target market. So what I have found to be easier when you're just starting is to be able to clearly define that geographic market using like county line boundaries and state boundaries, simply because we're able to find better statistical data about those counties and those states. You can always estimate if your area, your geographical area kind of goes outside of boundary lines, you can always kind of estimate what the population of that area is. But I always really like to make that a very educated guess supported by statistical data. So if that's applicable to you, then, educated guesses are going to be best based on the data. But I really recommend as you get started, just kind of cutting off at those county line boundaries. So we're going to define our geographic market. We're going to gather respective population Data Bureau. I have all of the links to these particular organizations that I'm going to talk about on my website. So you can just click on them and go straight to where you need to go. If you go to the US Census Bureau, you're going to have to drill down quite a bit to get to the data that you need. So after the course, I'll give you that link so that you can get there. But we're going to need to gather our respective population data, our death rate data. I'm going to explain more about that here in a minute. Then we're going to need cells by geographic market. So those of you who have multiple branches, you're probably going to want to calculate your target market share per branch because each branch most likely services a differing market. So you're going to want those cells divided out by geographic market. Since we're new into 2025, this is the prime opportunity to use your 2024 data. You're probably just working on getting your books closed up. You probably already have your previous year's cells, like perfect opportunity. So we need the 2024 sales, if that's what you're going to use. And we also need to know the number of units sold, okay? Now, some of you are going to know the exact number of units that you've sold. Others are not. That is okay, okay? We'll talk about that a little bit later, what to do if you don't know. And then we're also going to need our respective cremation and burial rates, just using the most recent data available. So defining your geographic market. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but we're going to refer to this as our geographic market, okay? That's what we're going to call it in this presentation. So let's pretend that you and I go into business together. We are going to start a monument company in Dallas County, Texas, okay? I've always wanted to live in Dallas. I'll never ever live in Dallas, but let's just pretend that we're there, okay? And that's where we're going to put our little monument company. So we're going to start by gathering the entire living population of Dallas County, Texas, okay? The living population. Now, Dallas is a large metro area. The population is going to constantly change. We're just going to use the most recent US Census Bureau data, okay? That's all we need to use. And again, I have links to that on my blog. So the US Census Bureau says the population for Dallas County, Texas is 2,613,539 people. That's a lot of monuments, y'all. That's a huge market. So that's actually not our entire market, okay? We're going to have to drill down because not all of those people need a monument. So step one, gather our population data. Now we're going to work on our death rate. We have to know how many people in that population are estimated to pass away. So death rate, as I've learned, actually varies depending on state, okay? So there's like this national US death rate that you saw in Dawn's slide that I shared earlier, but it is actually going to vary depending on state. So I looked it up. And you can find that information, the death rate, actually the Centers of Disease Control. Again, I have a link to that on the blog. The Centers for Disease Control put statistics out about death rates in each state. I think there may also be a way to drill down and find death rate per county where there's, because it will vary a little bit based on metropolitan areas and rural areas, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that on their website yet. If you figure that out, holler at me because I'd love to know. But the Texas death rate, based on the data I found, is 906.4 deaths per population of 100,000. So we have to convert that to a percentage. So it's 0.009064%, okay? That's the death rate. So we're going to take our population, which is the 2,613,539, and we're going to multiply it by the death rate. That means that we're going to come up with 23,689 people. That's the number of people that we are expecting to pass away in Dallas County, okay? So it's our estimated annual deaths at the current population and current death rate, okay? So that's incredibly important data to know. You have if we have this pretend business together, we have 23,689 opportunities, okay, to sell a monument, right? Wrong. This number might not be entirely factual. You know, there's likely standard deviations. But anyway, we at least know the estimated number of deaths that we can expect. But as you all know, cremation, not all those people are going to be buried, okay? So we have our estimated general market right here. We want to know how many people are going to expect to be cremated. So I went to Cana. That's my preferred source for cremation rates. They do an incredible study every, I think it's 5 years that they do their Cana study. I remember off the top of my head, but their data is extremely reliable. They track it very closely. And so that's what I've always used. Now, Cana does have links to all of the differing states and their cremation rates. So I went in and found that the Texas cremation rate is listed between 51% and 60%. Now, having a range listed to me was a little odd because I would rather have like a cold hard number, but that's okay. We can deal with a range. And so what I chose to do is, you know, Dallas County is a more metropolitan area, most likely going to experience more cremations than your rural areas will. So I chose to be conservative and use 60% as my cremation rate. Okay. Now, some of you may be tracking, you know, the deaths locally and tracking whether those people are cremated or buried. By all means, use your own cremation rate if you have that available. Just make sure that it's reliable data. That's really the big thing you need to be cautious of here. Is just making sure that you're using reliable data. So moving on, we're going to take our estimated annual deaths of 23,689, okay? And we're going to multiply them by our 60% cremation rate. And that's going to bring us 14,213. Those are the estimated number of individuals that will most likely choose cremation. So we're going to take our estimated annual deaths right here. We're going to subtract from that our 14,213 cremated people. And that's going to leave us with 9,476 people choosing traditional burial, or estimated to choose traditional burial. Okay, so we've calculated the number of folks estimated to be cremated and the number of folks that are estimated to be buried. But we all know that we have clients who were cremated and their ashes were interred in the cemetery, okay? Like we all know that that happens. So our next step is to estimate how many people are going to be cremated and buried. So up here we see we have our estimated cremations and our estimated number of burials, okay? We already know that 14,213 folks are estimated to choose cremation. But according to the National Funeral Directors Association, 31.7% of folks choosing cremation would like to have their ashes buried. That's encouraging. So that's where I come up with this 31.7 figure here. 31.7 will choose burial for their ashes. They're not wanting to be scattered. They're not wanting to be stuck in their great niece's closet for years on end. They're wanting to have their ashes interred out in the cemetery. So we're going to take our estimated number of cremations, which is this 14,213, and we're going to multiply it by 31.7. And that's going to tell us that 4,505 folks choosing cremation are also going to choose to bury their cremains. Knowing that information is for us because that's going to help us arrive at our estimated geographic market. The way we're going to arrive at that is we're going to take that 9,476 people that are choosing burial. Got that figure up here and I've got it right here. We're going to add to it those that are choosing cremation and burial, and we're going to come up with 13,981. That is our estimated potential target geographical market. Okay. That's the estimated number of people that we think are going to need a memorial or a date cut if they already have the memorial. We know there's variables there. As memorialists, we're all used to that, okay? So this is our potential target geographic market. Okay. So we're halfway done here with this calculation, okay? Of course, like I mentioned, there's standard deviations for accuracy of this figure. I don't really care about the standard deviation. I haven't calculated it because I feel like the standard deviation in this case is going to work both ways. I mean, you are going to have people who passed away elsewhere that are going to be interred in Dallas County at our, near our pretend monument company. We're going to have people in Dallas County that pass away and they want to be interred elsewhere and they're not going to be included in our target market. There's lots of variables there, and we all know that. Some people already have their headstones, whatever. But for the sake of estimating target or estimating our market share, we're going to use this figure. If you're a statistician and you want to calculate your standard deviation, go for it. Like whatever works for you and helps you feel more confident with your figures, I'm all for that. So what's next? We've calculated our estimated geographical target market, right? We're going to finally start calculating our market share. Okay. And we're going to start with those ingredients, quote unquote, that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. So we're going to start with annual sales. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to use 2024 sales data if possible. And we're going to pretend that our little pretend monument company sold approximately 2,500 units last year. Okay. So for some people, this part is going to be the hardest part, and that's okay. Some of you are super organized with your financial data and you're going to have no problem with this, but then there are others who struggle in this area. And if you fall into that category where you're really kind of struggling with this, that's okay. That is absolutely okay. Using an educated guesstimate is fine. As you grow in your business, you will learn, tips and tricks to get more organized. But if you need to use an educational guess, that's fine for now. Like, go ahead and use it. When in doubt, estimate it out, okay? That's going to be my new slogan. When in doubt, estimate it out. So first of all, we want to know our sales. And to be honest, we're less concerned about revenues and really more concerned about the number of units sold. And that's because we've already quantified our target market population, okay? So it's just easier to compare the number of units sold, quantities to quantities instead of quantity to dollars or whatever. So if you don't have the number of units sold, you can use your revenue and you can divide that by the average ticket to come up with a rough idea of the number of units that you sold. And by unit, I mean a complete memorial set, minus like date cuts and stuff like that. So if you have like a die and a base and a flower pot, that's 1 unit. A marker, 1 unit. Slant and base, 1 unit. Someone who just comes in and buys a flower pot, that is not a unit. Okay, don't include that. Don't include the folks who come in and buy a flower pot. You can play around with date cuts because date cuts are actually going to kind of filter into your target market. But for purposes of today, we're not worrying with that. Okay. So our pretend monument company sold 2,500 units last year, and we are simply going to take our 2,500 units sold, and we're going to divide it by that target market. We're just going to see what percentage of that target market we sold to. And I come up with 18% here, okay? So based on this calculation, our little pretend monument company is going to recognize that we own 18% of the Dallas County, Texas market, okay? That's not bad. especially for a large metro area. That's not bad. But how are we going to use it? Okay, that's the important thing. And this is the big takeaway that I want you to have. If you're going to be calculating your market share, it would be helpful to go back and calculate it for several years, if at all possible. Maybe put it in a spreadsheet where you can really track it, because you're going to start noticing trends, okay? So what we're going to do here, we've calculated our estimated market share at 18%. And I've put a graph here to show you the year, and then to show you the estimated number of units sold, the revenues for that year. That's the number of sales, just your total dollars in sales, and your net income. So net income is going to be, of course, your revenues minus your expenses. This is your net income, your market share. And I also like to put in there your average ticket, okay? Some of you may have other data that you want to add to this, and that's fine. You might want to add colors in here. You might want to do, if you sell a lot of bronze, you might want to do bronze versus granite. You could do monument styles. You could do all sorts of stuff in here to track and analyze going forward. So we did 2023. I also put in this chart 2022. So in 2022, we have our number of units sold, our revenues, our net income share, and our average sell. Okay. All of these figures are really important. And it's really tempting to look at this chart and to think, oh, well, we gained 1% market share. That is awesome. We are doing great. But that's actually not necessarily the case. And that's what we want to look at, okay? So when you look at this, you see that in 2023, we sold 100 units more than we sold in 2024. Our revenues decreased despite having sold more. Our net income decreased despite having sold more. Our market share increased, and our average sale decreased. Okay, so if you're we have this pretend monument company together, and we're trying to make decisions here, the first thing I would do is look at this data and ask if we had any large projects or larger than normal sales that could attribute to our revenues. Like if in 2022 we had a larger than normal sale, then that might tell us why our revenues were so much higher. But in our pretend monument company, that's not the case. It was just an average year, okay? So once you determine that there wasn't anything unusual going on, then we can sit there and we can say, okay, why do we have this difference? Because, we want to know why. We want to know why we had an increase. We want to know why we had a decrease. We want to know all those things. So when you start really kind of breaking it down, where you're saying, okay, we sold more units, but our average sale went down, the first thing that would come to mind for me is we may have sold more units because we're getting the right message in front of the right people. But with our average sale decreasing, that tells me that our customers are coming to us looking for memorials with a smaller footprint. Maybe they're buying markers instead of uprights, or very small uprights. With cremation, we talked about cremation in the beginning. A lot of consumers are wanting monuments with a smaller footprint because they're putting multiple ashes in one plot. Sometimes that can equate to a smaller average ticket than what you're used to in the past. So the next thing that would tell us is, if that's the case, if we are selling more, but our average sale is down, then we may have a pricing strategy problem going on here. With cremation, if you are going to be experiencing smaller footprint sales, smaller average tickets, you have to stay on top of your pricing strategy. You have to really pay close attention to that, because if you don't, and you focus on keeping things cheap, that's not going to be sustainable as the cremation rate continues to increase. So that would be something you would want to take into consideration. The next thing we would have to wonder is, with our target marketing, that extra 100 units that we sold, are we targeting the right market? Are we targeting your, what I call them, I don't know. Are you targeting your bottom feeders that just want the cheapest thing possible? If so, then you might want to adjust your marketing a little bit and maybe target your higher end buyers, your buyers who aren't going to want the absolute cheapest thing that you offer. So you would really want to analyze that marketing message to see, what's going on here. Are we targeting the wrong people, or is it just that our target market's needs have changed? And that's going to be a tough call to make for anyone analyzing that. The next thing you would have to consider is, with a decline in your revenues, but an increase in units sold and a decline in net income, is targeting that extra market, targeting your folks contributing to your $100 or your 100 units additional sales, is it worth it? And that's only a call that you can make through analyzing all of this as the company owner or manager. Is it worth going after those extra 100 cells? Or would you rather, stick with a target market that's going to be more profitable, even if it means losing a percentage of that market share? So looking at your data in this way and including your market share is incredibly important. Could we analyze this without the market share? Yeah, we could. But without the market share, we wouldn't be able to sit there and think, okay, is my advertising strategy working? You can look at the number of units sold, but a lot of times you can attribute an increased number of units sold to an increase in deaths that year, or whatever the case may be. We don't want to do that. We don't want to guess why we're selling more. When we see the increase in market share, then we know that most likely it's because we're getting our message in front of the correct target market. Or maybe we're not getting our message in front of the correct target market, however you want to look at that. So that's what I would challenge you to include in your year-end analysis if you haven't already. Over time, as you work with this calculation, you'll start making it your own. You might want to segment your target Catholic market. If you have an area that has a large Catholic influence, you might want to know what percentage of that Catholic segment you own. You can calculate that. Absolutely, you can calculate that. I do have on the blog, you can download it, a little sheet that'll tell you where to find statistics for different faiths in your area. If you want to estimate your market share based on faith, you can estimate your market share based on race. A lot of clients, whether it be faith or race or whatever, they want to do business with people who understand them. And so you might find that data helpful. Is it worth targeting a certain faith group in your area? Do you have enough of that target market? Is your message reaching them correctly? So segmenting that out is really interesting. And as you dive in and start growing more comfortable with these calculations, you can really segment all kinds of markets, and that's exciting. Being able to segment those markets and know where you stand is going to help you really propel your business forward, while also navigating some of the tumultuous waters that can come about with changes in the market and what the market is demanding, especially with cremation. So I hope you found this calculation to be helpful. As I mentioned, I have a blog. Some of you read it, some of you don't. That's fine. It's just AlisonRaymer.com. On the homepage, there's a brown button that will say MBNA webinar. You can download all of that straight from there. The only way for you to download it was for me to create a product, so there's zero price associated with it, so you can download it for free. In that download packet is a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is completely formulated for you. So all you have to do is enter in the statistical data, and then it'll calculate your estimated market share for you. It's all locked, so you can't like mess up a formula if you're not great with spreadsheets. You don't have to worry about messing up formulas or anything like that. I've put it on there at zero cost for today because I don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry getting that spreadsheet. If you can't get it downloaded today, holler at me. I'll help you with it. But it is free. And I'm ready to take questions.
I don't see any in the chat, so feel free to unmute, or if you want to use the raise hand feature at the bottom under React, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Did I go too fast? Did I get everyone so confused? I have no questions.
I have a question for you, Allison. One of the things that we always have to consider are spouses. How do you feel about figuring that in? Like, do we do that early? Do we not do it at all and not worry about it? Like our total was for amount of people, but obviously couples factor in. So can you talk about that?
Sure. So whenever you use your final date cuts, you can always use that as a unit. You can play with those final date cuts, but because we're not using cells numbers necessarily, we're just using units, you can include a date cut in there. That person would have needed a monument. They've already used you, so they're already part of your market share. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I was just thinking about where in the English. So now I have a total number, and now I've done the math on my final dates, and I'm just deducting my final dates basically from that number.
No. So
Okay.
when you're doing your, let me pull up my screen here. I'm very visual, so providing you a visual is easier for me. Let me pull it up here. I can't remember what slide that was.
I asked too because I mean we do notice these trends. I'm sure everybody here does with
Mhm.
final dates. I mean that death percentage in your in by county fluctuates. If you track it, you'll see fluctuations,
Mhm.
and we try to take a look at that and say, okay, that's true. Did we see that also in our final date, sales?
Mhm. Absolutely. You can take that final date, the final date cuts, you would just include them in this number right here. The number of units sold.
Oh, okay. All right.
I've played with it both ways myself over the years. I prefer to include that final date cut in my calculations just because that's already part of my market share. Like the goal is to know how much of the market you, and so I include that in mine. For me, it just works best because I consider it a unit. That was a good question.
I see
Does
another
anyone
one.
else have a question? I
Yeah.
saw a question come through, but how do
Can
I
you
read
see it?
them? Just a moment. Let me pull it up.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, what site did I find the 31.7% on? Abby had asked that. Abby, that's on the National Funeral Directors Association website. There's a link to that in that packet of download information. I include step by step how I calculated this, complete with the links to the sites. That download packet includes like a PDF of today's slides, the notes for the slides, it also includes a very detailed, like, this is how I calculated it. This is where this figure came from. So you can click on that link and go straight there. So you don't have to wade through the entire NFDA website. But that's where I got that figure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie, for putting that Cana link on there.
Another question is, how do you account for pre-need sales?
Yeah, so I don't personally have tons of pre-need sales. So I don't, each year I'm going to probably have about the same number of pre-need sales. I just lump that all into my number of units sold. Um, but I don't have a lot. Some businesses have a lot of pre-need sales, and if that's the case, then I'm not really quite for sure. You'd probably have to find statistics on the percentage of the population that pre-plans their funerals, and you'd have to calculate your share a little bit differently. Because you would have your at-need market share, which is what we calculated today, and then you would also have to calculate your pre-need market share. But those figures are most likely, I would say you could probably find those on the NFDA website, the number of people who pre-arrange. Theirs are going to be funeral-driven statistics. I don't know, what percentage of people who pre-plan a funeral also pre-plan their monument, but you could probably dive into that on the NFDA website.
Yeah. Abby?
Okay, quick question here, and this might be, I don't know, nothing that you can answer, but is there a way to calculate for transient populations? Like, we live in a military town, and so we can calculate our county, but a large part of that is part of our army post, which also goes into the next state. So there's people that don't live on post, then they're considered a Montgomery County resident, and then in 2 years they move, 3 years they move. Of course, somebody comes back in their spot probably, but is there a way, or just a figure, that a variable that you can place in there to take care of that?
So if the population's staying consistent, that's a good question, because most of those people are they going to be buried elsewhere? Or are they going to be buried in the national cemetery?
Right.
You know, and if they're buried in national, that's probably not a unit sold, Um, you would probably have to back that population out of your population. So you'd have to get your census data, and then I think you'd have to know what the population is of that base, or at least the percentage of the population on that base in your state. And then I think you'd have to subtract them out, is my first thought with that. That's how I think I would handle it. How have you handled it in the past?
Well, we keep a spreadsheet of obituaries and like the cemeteries where they're buried. So we're starting to be able to go back and kind of look and see like who went to the veteran cemetery and who didn't. But then also, I don't know if it's a ploy with the funeral homes, but some of them are not posting in the obituaries anymore if they're even having a burial or where the burial is. And I've noticed that trend starting, I don't know, probably mid last year, where a lot of them are just excluding that information completely. And I don't know why exactly, but it's hard to know.
It is. We've also noticed a decline in some of that information being shared. I think some of it is clients being a little bit shy about data theft, like their loved ones, what identity theft. But some of it could be competitive reasons. I don't really know. I don't know why they do that. But I mean, we track it with funeral homes as well, and I've also noticed a reduction in some of the data. You might check, yeah, I have no advice on that, on how to make that more accurate, other than just asking them or getting the data from your state. It'll be a little bit behind, but the states also track, I believe, the cremation rates and burial rates. Your vital statistics folks. So you might be able to get data there too.
Thank you.
Other question?
What was your next step after you first calculated your market share percentage? Oh, good question, Bobby. So the first time I calculated it, um, it took me a while because I had just literally taken that data from Dawn's presentation and then just kind of sat there and massaged it and tried to figure it all out. Um, at that time, we had a satellite office in a different town. And so I started using my market share data for that particular office. And one thing that I was noticing was that the market share wasn't increasing as quickly as I would have liked it to over the years. So I started tracking our number of online sales, like people who live in that town but bought from us online as opposed to the walk-in traffic. And once I started seeing that the market share was remaining consistent, but the number of sales were predominantly like people, you know, on our website or calling, like not coming in person, that allowed us to make the decision to shut down that particular location without missing much in sales. So we were still able to retain that market share. So we still calculate that market share, we still track it, but we were able to make that decision. And in the long run, it's been the best decision for us. So that was the first like big usage of that data that I had. You can also use it if you're thinking of going into a market, thinking of buying a monument company in a market that's close to you. You can use it to help you decide, should I stay or should I go? You know, should I enter that market? Should I not? Are there more creative ways to enter the market? You know, it can really help you with your analysis of go for it or not. That was a good question. Anyone else have questions? Well, if you have questions you don't feel comfortable asking, you know, in a forum or anything like that, just holler at me. I'm glad to answer your questions. I might not know the answer, but I'll try. So,
Oh,
one,
there's one more.
how would you use that to determine purchasing another monument company or moving into an area if you don't have any data about sales numbers? Okay. Well, you can still estimate how many units you think you're going to sell in that area. It's not going to be, you know, a factual estimate, but you can kind of do an educated guesstimate how many sales you're going to have in that area. If the population is 15,000, let's say, if you have another area that the population's 15,000, you can kind of look at the numbers of units sold in that area and use it to calculate how many you think you're going to sell in this other area if the census data is close. If it's not, then you know I'd recommend reaching out to someone in the industry in a totally different market, but who may serve a area that's similar size, similar demographics. Kind of find out from them, you know, how many units would you say you sell a year? And then you can use that data. So using your own historical or getting data from someone else would be really helpful. Oh, thanks, Ryan. You're welcome, Kyle. Anyone else have any questions, thoughts?
Well, if anyone else has questions, they certainly can contact you, as Allison said. Allison, thanks so much for being here today and sharing this information. I know I learned a lot and gives us a lot to think about for sure. Thank you all of the attendees for being here today. Please note that this webinar does count for 1 hour of CM credits. You can learn more about the Certified Memorialist Program at monumentbuilders.org. Click on About MBNA and select Certified Memorialist Program. Also, if you're not already doing so, I encourage you to find the WinMBNA Facebook group, request to join so you can be the first to know about our future programs. And then finally, our registration is open for the Monument Industry Show in Cleveland from March 13th to the 16th. WinMBNA is going to be hosting an event during the convention, which will include a deeper dive into the etching. And of course, we'll have cocktails and networking. We're very excited to see 50% of the attendees last year were women in San Diego. So hopefully we'll have the same or better turnout in Cleveland. Visit monumentbuilders.org and go to the events for more details. Thanks again for being here and for your participation. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.